And it is Denver Sports Tonight on this Wednesday night in the Mile High City. He's Marcello Romano. I'm Will Peterson. We will hang out with you for the next hour as the Broncos turn their attention to the New England Patriots on Christmas Eve. But Cello, the meltdown in Motown, still on everyone's mind 5 days later. Both Sean Payton and Russell Wilson hit the podium today. Little time to cool off since the sideline tantrum by the head coach toward the quarterback. And then Sean Payton goes up there for 14 minutes, gets zero questions about Russell Wilson.
And I guess he didn't take your advice either then.
Oh, yeah, there was no apology.
No, that's not coming from him.
Do you find it funny, though? And I love our local media. I'm friends with almost all of them. But do you find it funny that Sean Payton is so good at controlling the narrative that he gets asked about this on Monday morning on his conference call, kind of blows it off. You know, it's just the one he doesn't even show his face on the Zoom. And then Wednesday, he's back at the podium. It was a national story. It's leading ESPN. It's leading NFL Network. Sean Payton freaks out on Russell Wilson. And he doesn't get one more follow-up of, hey, have you guys talked? Are you two good? I mean, that seems like a pretty check-the-box question to me.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, Sean Payton didn't field it today.
Well, I think he wields a heavy sword then, huh? I mean, to the point where things have changed. Obviously, going into training camp this year, there was different things done because of the way Sean Payton wants things done. I'm pretty shocked that not a single person said a word about it.
He's that good.
Yeah.
He's that good at controlling the narrative and making it clear.
In fear of what? Not being allowed back in?
I don't think they would rip credentials, but I think we saw the relationship get frosty with certain reporters. You'll remember after the Miami game this year, I'm not going to say the guy's name because he's a good guy, but he wanted to put the blowout into perspective and said, there you go. And KJ is on it because Sean just got his butt kicked by 50 points. And the reporter, rightfully so, is saying, hey, this was like a historic beatdown. Where do you go from here? And he hit him with, what's the question?
Yeah.
And I think there may be some folks that are worried about that frostiness and thinking, okay, Sean was asked about it Sunday. I mean, if you watch the postgame presser, it dominated it on Sunday.
Yeah.
Monday morning, he gets asked about it again because he does his Zoom call. And then today, it's just a little more casual setting. Everyone's had a few days to cool off. You figure all Sean really needs to say is, yeah, Russ and I talked. Russ and I are good. Russ and I are on to New England. You know, Channel is inner Belichick. We're on to New England. We're on to Cincinnati. And instead, he's telling stories today about coaching against Bill Belichick in the Pro Bowl in 2006. Taking a stroll down memory lane.
Well, I think there is more to share. I mean, I still, when you look back at the situation, I don't have a problem with a coach berating a player. That's not my issue. The thing is that we couldn't piece it together. Like, why? You know, and Russ, you have a lot of different perspectives here, Will. One, people saying, hey, he needs to fire back at his coach. Nobody can talk to me like that. You're not going to be one of them. I would have been on board with that one. I also would have been on board with him if he'd have just kind of shrugged it off and walked away. Because it wasn't like Sean started, left, and then he came back and he wanted more. Yeah. It was like a father at a child. Like, you're going to sit here and listen to me scream at you because you didn't do what I asked you to do. Our problem is, what did he miss?
I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you. I was on with Stokely and Josh today, and Stokely said he thinks it was the timeout that was taken earlier on that drive.
Who the hell cares then?
That's what I said, because I said, Stoke, listen, they scored 3 touchdowns. Jaleel scored on second down. Javonte scored on third down. He didn't throw the red flag either time.
Right.
And then Michael Burton scores on fourth down and a bogus Quinn Miners penalty, offsides, whatever. That was a ridiculous call, wipes it off the board. And I think Sean freaked out on Russ because they walked away with 3 points on a drive they scored 3 touchdowns. But my question is, and I think you're hinting at this here too, how is any of that Russell Wilson's fault? That Jaleel scored, the line judge marked him short. Javonte scored, the line judge marked him short. And then the line judge throws a bogus flag on Miners. How is any of that an issue that the quarterback deserves to get chewed out?
Listen, man, it would have been one thing if he missed a read or something, right? Or checked into a play that just had no chance in being successful. None of that happened. You just laid it out. They scored. I mean, you can argue that they scored all 3 times, and we didn't see one red flag go. And everything we've ever seen in the NFL going up to this, well, you can have a head coach be pissed when the timeout's called in the moment. That was later on in that drive, and you had success in that drive. My questions were, where's the red flag? And 2, Why are we kicking a field goal at that point?
Yeah, down 28-7. It makes it an 18-point game. It's still 3 possessions. That really doesn't do you a lot of favors.
And this is the one time, this is one of my biggest frustrations on the year, is that the play clock continues to get under 5. Snap after snap after snap. And that's the one time he knew exactly what he wanted to do, and you got pissed at him then. I'm more frustrated as a fan watching it get down to 3, 2, 1 because of the frustrations we had last year.
Sure.
And the crap that was said earlier in this year about, well, we'll get wristbands and we'll figure it out. This is the one time that he actually got the playoffs soon enough that you didn't have time, if that's the reason, to hear from your people upstairs telling you, you got to throw the flag here. We scored right there. And it would have been worth it at that point. And maybe he was hesitant to throw the flag because of the timeout earlier.
Yes, that's what Stokely was getting at earlier.
But here, listen, you got to trust your people upstairs. You know, I mean, they're not always going to be right, but we could go back and look at those plays, and are they subjective? I think 2 of them are easily a touchdown. The phantom offsides call, I mean, that's one that you write to the league about.
Yes.
What are you talking about here?
Yeah, that's one where you just share the screen grab and go, how was he offsides here? Because I'm not seeing that at all.
And was his helmet above some of the other people on the line? Yeah, but it wasn't across the ball.
No.
And you look at some of these sets, Will, right now, with like the Chiefs and the Eagles are the best at it. It's their flying V, and their tackles are off early almost every play. They get that first kick back before the ball is moving.
Coincidentally, they played in the Super Bowl last year, right?
Exactly.
So maybe we should take a few lessons from them. But yeah, I mean, listen, if you just throw the red flag on the Jaleel play, then the Javonte play never happens. The Burton play never happens. And the blow-up never happens because then it's 28-14. You're feeling like you're back in it. One stop, okay, we're going to go down, make it 28-21. It just is a weird sequence of events that ultimately got Russ chewed out by his head coach on national TV. Again, it's dominated the conversation for 5 days now. And yet today he goes up there for 14 minutes and no one can follow up on his and Russ's relationship. That just surprised me a little bit. It did.
Well, it's big time. And I would ask you this. Name me another head coach that's done that this year.
Not one that I can think of top of mind.
Not off the top of your head. That went viral like that, right?
No.
I mean, there's been plenty of coaches that were frustrated, and you can tell it in their mannerisms and their facial expressions, all of it. But normally, when you get berated like that, it's from your position coach. It's from a secondary coach that you're not going to see, not the head coach. And he has experience doing this.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I think he probably was if you look back on it, if you did that, everyone would hate to see themselves kind of in that position. He just lost it. And our biggest question that he never answered was, what were you so upset about?
Well, and think about it. Think about these sideline.
Oh, my bad.
Think about these sideline meltdowns that we had last year, right? We had 2 of them that were infamous, and they were a mark of a dysfunctional football team. Mike Purcell going off on Russell Wilson. I believe it was in Carolina, and that was sort of the boiling over of the defense-offense frustrations.
Yep.
And then Dalton Reisner can't get a job for 8 months because he shoved Brett Rippon on Christmas Day. What are you going to do about it, Brett? I mean, come on. Those were both embarrassing last year and sort of were the 2 kind of images people thought of this 5-12 season. And yet here we are 7-6 at the time, 7-7 now, but 7-6 at the time. You've won 6 of your last 7 games, and yet Sean Payton, for whatever reason, and I still can't pinpoint it, but for whatever reason, was so frustrated with Russ that it just boiled over and exploded in that moment. And I think it's very telling that the head coach has that much of a lack of control in that very moment because it's been building for months and months.
They scored. He didn't make big mistakes there.
They scored 3 times.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, none of them counted.
Listen, man, I get that if you go 3 and out 4 times and then your quarterback comes off, you want to lay into him, go for it. I mean, it's warranted at that point, correct?
Yeah.
You score, and because the officials don't get it right, you're going after a guy. I would have liked to see just a little bit more fire out of Russ. And maybe that's just him. Maybe he's the way he was raised, he's just going to sit there and take that. But I would have rather seen him fire back or just walk away. At that point, what is the point? I don't know what you could garner from him screaming at him there.
Yeah, at that point.
Especially if it is about that timeout that happened how long ago? That's gone out of Russ's head.
Totally.
Completely gone.
You've lost such control of your emotions that sometimes it just makes sense. Like, hey, you're not being rational right now, so I'm going to remove myself from the conversation. That's what you would have liked to see Russ do. All right, so Sean doesn't get asked about it today, but Russ does. Here's Russ on if he's talked to Sean since the sideline blow-up. All right, so you get the Russ sort of deadpanning, cracking a joke. Yeah, we've talked about the game plan, and then he goes full Belichick. Oh yeah, we're on to New England, whatever. I guess that's the most you're going to really get out of Russell Wilson in this sort of uncomfortable situation. I am glad that Russell Wilson was at least asked about it, but also got to read between the lines there, Cello. Russ could have easily said today, yeah, coach sat me down. We chatted about it. We understand it went nuts on social media. We don't want that to happen again, and we've moved on. He didn't say any of those things. All right, so I have to ask you this. Is that A, because that didn't happen? Sean just didn't sit him down and talk about it. Or is that B, it did happen, but Russ is so concerned about Sean liking him and making his quarterback in 2024 that he's not going to go into a hot mic and say, yeah, Sean and I sat down and, Sean said he was in the wrong or whatever. Which one do you think it is? Do you think it happened? Do you think a meeting happened? Or do you think Russ is telling the truth? And truly, Sean just says, I'm Sean, I'm the king of the castle, and we're on to New England.
I'm going to go with option C, Will, which is that a discussion was had, and they were still in disagreement about what transpired there.
So you think behind closed doors, Russ did give him some pushback?
I don't even know if it was that. I think he may have just taken it and been like, internally, I don't believe what you're saying right now. I mean, and Zach brought it up, I think, yesterday in his clip after the game, how many times he said the word touchdown. And it was kind of like a coy way of saying, I got yelled at and we scored 3 freaking times, man.
Right.
I mean, he didn't, to me, it's kind of a coy way, like, where's my flag? Where's my support to say, we scored? We shouldn't even had to run the other plays.
Shouldn't have had to after second down when Jaleel McLaughlin was across the plane.
Yep.
And Sean's talking about how he maybe doesn't have the most success down there after the game and this and that. I don't care, bro. That's a game-changing play at that moment because then you've scored 2 touchdowns in the first, 9-10 minutes of the third quarter.
Yep.
And then the defense can at least sit there and go, guys, they've gotten us 2 scores. We got to go get a freaking stop because to your point, that field goal was deflating to the defense.
Oh,
it
yeah.
was because then it's 28-10 and it's like, what are we doing?
And then you give up a first down on a 3rd and 9 run.
On a run, on 3rd and 9.
On a run. Who even calls a run play? In today's NFL, 3rd and 9, you're having that much success against this defense that you're going to be like, let's go with the run. And part of it could be because, you had a lead. But even then, nowadays, Will, you don't get those calls. 3rd and 9 is 98% a pass. Unless you're trying to kill the clock. It was too early in the game for them to be doing that.
Here's a little more, Russ. This is on if he saw the social media blow up. So basically everything that's gone viral, if he saw it. It's a long cut. I'm not going to play all of it, but the first 10 to 12 seconds are worth listening to. All right, so then there's where he goes on a show. The thing about life, guys, is we got to embrace, that's when Russ goes into that. But the first few seconds of that are telling because I was there. I don't need to go rewatch it on Twitter. I don't need to go rewatch it on YouTube. I lived it. I lived getting my butt chewed out on NFL Network in front of however many million of people were watching that game.
Yeah.
And that might be the heartiest Dove Valley laugh Russell Wilson has ever gotten, Cello. Listen again. Like you get the initial, and then you get the ha 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 ha, the evil Dr. Evil laugh.
He was even surprised. Wow, I made it funny, and it worked.
Yeah,
and it wasn't just that media laugh. Like some people thought that was really. I mean, you get that a lot. We've been there, right? I didn't think that was. I wouldn't have laughed at that being there.
I think it was a little bit of I'm the one who had to go to timeout, so I understand it. I don't need people on the internet to tell me about it.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
Is there something to that?
Yeah, and another thing that I think is kind of crazy is that I was in here a week ago, Will, and we're talking about at the end of that show, you're telling me, what if Kansas City goes in, loses to New England, and then the Broncos could win the division? And there was legitimate conversations of not only were they going to be a playoff team, but how far could they go if they continue to improve this season? You lose one game, you get shellacked again. I mean, I came in and worked with you the day after, or the couple days after the Miami game, and I told you Seabass hawked on their burger. Well, the Lions did the same thing, and now everyone's woe is me, and is Russell the right guy going forward again?
That's a really interesting point you bring up because a lot of people, not you or I, but a lot of people, even people on this station, tried to tell me that, the Lions game doesn't matter all that much because it's an NFC team, and as long as they go 10-7, they're going to be in the dance. And then all of a sudden, Sunday, Cello, the Bears drop a Hail Mary.
Yep.
And the Texans are kicking 56-yard field goals, and all of a sudden it's, they had to beat the Lions if they wanted to make the playoffs. I'm not even sure 10-7 is good enough. And to your point, it's like, man, not only was this a loss, but it was the meltdown. It was giving up the 42. It was the offense looking anemic the entire first half.
It was 0-0 after one.
True.
42 points in 3 quarters.
But do you think there is a sense of overreaction because of everything that happened? Put it this way: is the way they lost?
It was the optics
more important than the actual score.
It was.
If they had lost on a walk-off field goal.
Yes, because it was the optics of it. Not only did you get beat down and give up a 40 burger, then you have the meltdown on the sideline. The defense is skating free. You get 42 points in 3 quarters, and listen, after half, the Broncos offense started moving the football. Like you said, had they scored what they should have in that second drive, you're back into the game. And I'm not sure that it would have mattered. I mean, I think defense they had them figured out. And that team speed is shown to be a big problem for this defense.
The Broncos are slow. When they play a fast offense, they're in trouble. I mean, the two fastest offensive they've played this year have scored a combined 112 on them.
It's crazy.
I mean, you look at what Miami did to them, and they got exposed, and then you look at what Detroit did to them. To your point, if it weren't for the 0-0 first quarter, that's a 50-burger we're talking about on
Easy.
Saturday night in Motown.
Yeah. And, I mean, you can go back and did the fumble change the course of the game? I don't know. Maybe. It was still 0-0 after one, and then everything got fixed. They made the adjustments. They got outcoached. I mean, it wasn't – listen, the defense just got smoked, and then offensively, I don't know. You go back, and the big story of the game is only going to be how much Sean Payton dislikes Russell Wilson.
It's all anyone can talk about. Is the meltdown, the temper tantrum, whatever you want to call it.
And I don't know how going forward, I mean, I still think they can win out, but did that change the locker room? Here, Mike Kliss on this station saying, I'm sure there's people in this locker room that had a problem when they saw that footage of the way that Sean Payton went after him.
That's what I told Josh and Brandon today. I said, this is really unfortunate because, listen, we should be talking about a team that's been drama-free for 2 months, or at least was, saying, hey, guess what, guys? They've still won 6 of their last 8. The New York Times still says there's an 80% chance they make the playoffs if they go 10-7 and win 3 games they're favored in. And instead of looking forward to New England and, beating the Grinch himself on Christmas Eve and Bill Belichick, all we're talking about is this. And more importantly, we're talking about, you know what? This means Sean hates Russ and doesn't want him to be his QB in 2024. It has blown up the whole narrative of this incredible turnaround from 1-5, and it's really frustrating.
It is. It shouldn't be the talking point.
It should not.
Because here's what, to your point, they're going to be favored in all 3 games. You're playing backup quarterbacks. You're playing Bailey Zappi, Easton Stick, and Aiden O'Connell. I know he was named the starter after McDaniels got fired, but he's a backup quarterback.
Yeah, Jimmy G was supposed to be the guy there.
So should you go in and win these games? Yes, but that's not what we're talking about. And go back. When they were 1-5, if I'd have told you they're going to be 7-7 with this left on their schedule, and they're Justin Herbert's not playing. What's his name? Squishy Mac is out.
Mac Jones.
In New England.
Yeah.
And the Raiders have turned into somewhat of a dumpster fire, although I'll give credit to what they've kind of turned it around from where they were. If you would have said that at 1-5, everyone would have been ecstatic. Like, no way that's going to happen.
Yeah, it would have been like, okay, so they're going to win 10 games, and only one team in the history since the playoffs expanded to 7. Granted, it's a short history. It's 3 seasons, but 2 conferences, so 6 sample sizes. Only one team since 2020 that has won 10 games has missed the postseason, and that was the 2020 Miami Dolphins, who went 10-7 and lost on a tiebreaker when the 8th seed. So in 2021 and 2022, you won 10 games, you made the playoffs. Again, they have an 80% chance if they win 10 games to make the playoffs. And yet it just feels like, Cello, they're going to find a way to choke one of these 3. This Russell Wilson, Sean Payton thing has become a mega distraction. Sean's going to do everything in his power to cut Russ in the next 6 weeks so they don't have to eat the money on the 2025 portion of the deal. And the Broncos are going to be quarterback hunting this spring. And it all seems to come from an incident on the sideline against the Detroit Lions, when if the line judge just does his job and rules a touchdown for Jaleel McLaughlin on 2nd down, none of this happens. It's the ultimate butterfly effect. It's crazy to me.
I want to ask you really what you think on Sean Payton with Russell Wilson. Because I heard you guys talking previously, you, Zach, and Phil, talking about, well, what's out there if you get rid of Russ? And does Sean Payton have that little amount of trust in him or dislike for him that he would be willing to go down that route with one of those other names that you guys brought up? Or is this just a bump in the road? And if they are to go on and make the playoffs, whether they're successful in the playoffs or not, are they ready to kind of run it back again?
It's an interesting question, and there's two answers here. There's what I think and what Sean thinks. What I think is that Jameis Winston and Gardner Minshew don't excite me. And that's the type of quarterback you'd be looking to be your starter next year, paired with some sort of rookie either in the first or second round. I think what Sean thinks is that he's a quarterback whisperer. And when Teddy Bridgewater had to play those 6 games for him in New Orleans, they won a lot of them. I think it was 5-1. He had a winning season with Jameis Winston. I think Sean thinks anyone can walk in that QB door and he can get him above 500. So why pay Russell Wilson $50 million to do that when you can pay someone else a fifth or maybe an eighth of that price? So to me, to answer your question, I think Sean Payton is ready to move on from Russell Wilson. I think that's a mistake.
I'd agree with you. But you also had one of the – I'm sick of the Brees comparisons too. Right? Newsflash, he ain't Drew Brees. He ain't never going to be Drew Brees.
No.
And the relationship that was built between Drew and Sean is something that will probably never be – he won't get that again. So if that's the idea is that you want it to be that, you need to get out of that. And I believe he did. I just think the frustration level sometimes kicks in too often. You also got to keep in mind he had Drew Brees for how long and how many Super Bowls did they get?
They got 1.
How many did they get? 2?
I think only 1, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And now you can go back. You can go back and say they got jobbed.
I mean, the Minnesota Miracle.
Yes.
Come on. The no flag against the Rams. Come on. The overtime loss to the Vikings in the Superdome. Come on. I mean, Sean could easily have 2, if not 3 or 4 rings. He could.
Well, he doesn't, though.
I know, but some all-time playoff heartbreaks that were out of his control. I mean, he can't control the worst non-called pass interference in NFL history.
Well, Russ could have 2 as well.
He should have 2.
Should have 2.
Hands the ball to Marshawn Lynch, he has 2. He has 2. Let's hear one more from Russ talking about knowing these last 3 weeks are basically playoff games. All right, so now he goes into Clichéville, but the first 25 seconds of that are really interesting because Russell Wilson told us 10 minutes ago he doesn't pay attention. He doesn't know what social media is saying. He didn't care. He lived it. And now he's telling us, 1-5, everyone said we're out of it. At 7-7, everyone said we're out of it. Well, how do you know everyone's saying you're out of it unless you're paying attention? So that's another thing to consider in all this.
And shocking that maybe the most positive guy in the world, other than Tim Tebow, doesn't believe that they're out of it.
But they're not out of it. That's what's crazy.
No.
He's not saying that about a 6-8 football team.
And the team shouldn't believe that, but nationwide, even locally, we're talking about next year, Will.
People think it's done.
Yes.
Because people watch what happened on Sunday, even on Saturday when Minnesota gagged a game to Cincinnati. Everything that went wrong last weekend, or that could go wrong, did go wrong.
Yeah, for the Broncos.
And that 3 minutes when we're all watching NFL Red Zone and the Bears drop a Hail Mary, and then Fairbairn, when a tie for Houston would have been big, kicks it through at, the buzzer in OT from 56 or whatever it was. It did feel like kind of the rip your heart out moment. Like, okay, it's fun. It was fun. It was a fun run. They made it interesting, but it's over. Yet the math says it's not over if you win the last 3 games.
No, and we've been around this long enough, Will, that we know. Like sometimes you think something's gonna listen. One of the years that the Steelers, I think, went on to the Super Bowl, and maybe lost. Maybe it was that year that they lost to the Cardinals. They had lost a game in December. I think they fell to like 8-6 or something, and it was like, there's no way this team's gonna get it figured out. They're trending in the wrong direction. They only have a couple weeks left in their season. I think there's still 16 games at that point. They turned it around, and made a run to the Super Bowl. I mean, the Broncos when Brock Osweiler was leading them. I mean, you could have gone in those last couple games, and it was like they're just not a Super Bowl team. And a switch gets flipped, and you never know. I'm not saying that this team's going to make that kind of run, but if they handle their business, somebody else, those other teams, they play each other.
Someone's going to lose.
Yes.
Someone's going to lose. All right, you can read about it at denversports.com, including Andrew Mason talking to one Bronco today who said it was, quote, completely blown out of proportion. You can also check us out on YouTube, Denver Sports. Please subscribe, like, and share. Maybe even throw in a comment or two. Coming up on the other side, though,